Sausage.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Guzhnez, that's me, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is episode 2 in my playthrough of Kena Bridge of Spirits. This is the last episode, which shouldn't be much of a surprise if you played Kena and know how long, or in this case, short, it is. It took me roughly in the range of 9 to 10 hours, I think. Probably closer to 10 hours. And I think depending on how thorough you are, how much exploration you do, what difficulty plan as well, the average play time would probably be somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, which is a good length. It's a good, nice length. And this also ends up being a perfect first game to play in my change in thinking or my formation in the way I'll handle how I do episodes and how I break them up, how much time I put into a game before I record an episode. Because the thing I thought of in the argument for shorter episodes or shorter time between episodes is when I'm playing a game, my feelings could change drastically. I could be loving a game right from the start and then do a 180 and hate it by the end. I could do the opposite where I'm not liking the game and then something clicks and it's one of the best games I've ever played. Or something in the middle. It could be a wild range of emotions that I go through, like with Destiny 2, for example, which was a ridiculous ride. Each night I played it was a different feeling. And I think there's value in getting to go on that journey with me. And why I say Kena ended up being a kind of perfect game for that realization is because it kind of soured in the end. However, it didn't ruin the experience. The ending, specifically the final 2 bosses, were not great. They left a sour taste in my mouth. But that was just a brief taste in what was overall a delicious experience. They both begin with experience, so shut up. And you know what? I recorded this just after I got a call from my uncle about my mom having a minor stroke. It's just this year. Too much information? Too bad. This is just one hell of a year. God, I love you, 2024. Never end. Please end. But I did end up having this moment with Kena where I started getting more and more frustrated and didn't enjoy my time, which I was doing most of the time when playing it. And let's just get into it. So I want to start off with more of the good, or a continuation of the good, before I get into some of the bad parts and specifically why the ending was so bad. That makes it sound extra bad. It was just a change in the vibe and feel of everything that came before. And I'll get to why when I get to that part. But overall, I still really, really like the game. Like I said before, it's a great PS2 game that just happens to be on current and last-gen hardware. I don't even know what I mean when I say that, other than it's just this really simple, tight, no fluff adventure that doesn't have a lot of extra going on. It knows restraint. It practices restraint. And doesn't give you this giant world full of all these side missions and side activities you can do. There are things to collect and stuff to find, but when you want to do something more substantial, it's just the main quest. That's all you're doing. You are following the quest line, and that's it. And there's something really nice about having something that is streamlined and not bogged down with a bunch of extra stuff that can be nice if you just want a game that you can play for a very, very long time. And that does seem like it's something a lot of the industry and players want so that they can get the most bang for their buck. And that's why the valuation of games is something that is often in question. What makes a game worth $60, $70? What does it have to do? What does it have to give the player? Is there a specific minimum amount of hours? Does it need this? Does it need that? It's always in the conversation. And I've been vocally on the side of we devalue games and their worth, and if we even want to put something like an hour to dollar valuation on games, I think $10 per hour is more than fair enough. So in this case, Kenna would be, for me, a $100 game that I didn't have to pay $100 for because it's only a $40 game. Great value, I'd say. Others would say, $40? I think that should be 20 hours. And I look at that and I think, no. So I love that about the game. I love that it was just this tight adventure that didn't overstay its welcome, that didn't overcomplicate itself with a bunch of systems that didn't mean anything, and a bunch of extra crap that just we don't need. So I love that. And the story, I really enjoyed the simple but emotionally affecting story with just a few very personal stories, and then a slightly larger but not grand story regarding this village and what brought upon this corruption that took over. You have really good voice acting to go with it, and it never takes too much of your time to tell this or tell that. It's not a Kojima level story where you're getting these giant dumps that break up the gameplay so much. And I love Kojima, so I'm all for that, but I don't want that from a lot of people. Kojima has earned the ability to go crazy with that shit. So I loved all that. However, what soured me on the game, I'll get to in a little bit, because I want to mention a few things that I forgot to mention last episode. The ability you have to turn your rots into this ghostly slug thing that allows you to destroy certain parts of corruption and bring back life to crops and complete a handful of puzzles. I really don't like the way that mechanic, that bit of gameplay felt. It just didn't feel as tight as I would have liked. And it could be a little finicky. Thankfully, it's not a huge part of the game, but that was something that, in terms of gameplay, wasn't something I was enjoying. But outside of that, again, I was enjoying the platforming, the combat, and enjoyed combat even more as I opened up a few of the abilities. There aren't a lot of abilities, but getting to do a bit more with my bow and the bomb made combat a bit more fun. Another thing I really didn't like, or it's not so much that I didn't like it, I just did not appreciate the game doing everything in its power to confuse the shit out of me. And that is the pronunciation of the word pronunciation, the pronunciation of the main character's name. who I've been calling Kenna this whole time. However, the game, unless I had a bunch of minor strokes myself and misheard it at times, but I'm pretty sure at least Jedi, who was there for most of the streams, can attest to this. The game referred to her as Kenna, Kina, and Kana. I don't know which one it used most of the time, but I'm going to stick with Kenna. And I just bring this up because just pick one. Pick a lane and stick in it, because I just can't even with you with that shit. So that was another thing that annoyed the crap out of me. Just because, come on. How do I say her fucking name? It's the name of the game, too. I want to be able to say it right. And you're being a jerk about it. But what made the game sour a bit in the end were the final two bosses. And why I didn't like them is because they upped the challenge to a degree that wasn't in line with the rest of the game. Prior to that, I thought all of the bosses offered a satisfying challenge. They weren't too hard, but they were a nice up from basic combat, even challenges that you partake in at times. And in most cases, outside of the first boss where I was still trying to get a feel for the combat and my controls that I changed, I got through most either on the first try or second try, and that felt good. I didn't need to beat my head against the wall with these bosses, because that's not what I signed up for with this game. I didn't go into this game expecting a Souls-like. And I love those games, but I know what I'm getting with those games. And I've beaten a few of them, so it's not like I can't handle some tough bosses. However, that's not what I expected in Kenna, and that's not what I was given in Kenna up until the last two bosses. What I think ends up being a big issue with Kenna, especially in those two final bosses, is the parrying system and how crappy it is. It's just so difficult and such a pain in the behind. But I had to learn it, and I got a feel for it, at least with the second to last boss. And that made that boss doable. I feel like if I wasn't able to get some kind of grasp on the parent system, that boss would have drove me nuts. But when I beat that boss, I thought, oh, okay, that's the end. Good. That was fine. I'm glad this is over. Nice challenge. But then there was another boss following that where the dude you just beat takes your rod away and transforms it into a giant monster. In its design and what it asks you to do, I don't think that boss is actually harder than the first boss. It's still a challenge and a significantly more challenging fight than any of the previous or the bosses outside of those last two. But I was at such a point where I was ready to be done with it. I was at the end of my stream, and I didn't want to beat my head against anything. I was already frustrated from the last boss. I was tired. I was hungry. And so after a few failed attempts, I just lowered the difficulty to get it over with. And I don't feel bad about that, because like I said, I didn't sign up for challenging boss fights, and the game never ramped up to that in an organic way that made those final boss fights feel in line with the rest of the game. They felt out of place, and it really bummed me out that the game did that, because I think it could have been such a wonderful experience from start to finish had it not decided to up the difficulty for those two final fights. It's what keeps it from being a great game and leaves it at just being a very good game. I don't use a super granular scoring system. If I'm going to use any kind of scale, it's going to be 1 to 10. No 0.5 is nothing. But while this is a 7 out of 10 for me, this is the most 7 out of 10 or the highest 7 out of 10 you could possibly get. If I did go to decimal points, it would be a 7.9 out of 10 because it's so good so much of the time. But these few things that I have issues with, like the pairing system or some of the weird controls and how it feels, even with the controls, kind of like it's going after that Souls market with the default controls using the triggers and bumpers for combat, for example. And then these two final boss fights, it just makes a few bad decisions that keep it from hitting that 8. But a 7, regardless of what point you put it at, is still a really good game. It's a game that I had a really good time with and enjoyed, and I'm happy I played it. The sour ending did make it so that I don't have as strong of an inclination to hang out in the world and go after collectibles. I also think when I did a little bit of that, because I went back to the game the next day just to explore the world and maybe get a few collectibles, I don't think the world and level design is as good as some other games, namely a lot of platformers, in terms of it being fun to explore and do the collectible finding I just talked about. It is not more evident, but the fact that on the map you can't see what collectibles you found and utilize a guide in that way and not have issues makes it seem like that's really the way to go. If I wanted to 100% this game, I wouldn't do it organically. I would use a guide. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that is what I would end up doing. The way I look at this game too, and how I would explain those last boss fights, is that Kenna is like a delicious ice cream sundae with a cherry on top and all that. And when you're eating it, you save the cherry for last because you just want to have that final little treat to finish the sundae. So you're eating your sundae, you're having a good time. It's nothing amazing. It's not doing anything particularly new or exciting, but what it's doing, being a sundae, it's doing very, very well. And then when you go for that last bit, that last cherry, I mean, it's the only cherry, but you grab that cherry and you put it in your mouth and you take a nice big bite of it. You end up finding out that that cherry was actually a tomato the whole time. And some of you might be saying, I love tomatoes. Is it a cherry tomato? Because that kind of falls in line size-wise. I love eating those. You may love eating those, just like I love Souls games. But I didn't think or expect a tomato to be on top of my sundae. I thought it was going to be a cherry. So even if I may love tomatoes, I don't like surprise tomatoes. And that's what Kenna did. It surprised me with a tomato. But outside of that, I had a really good time with it. I highly recommend it to anyone looking for a fun adventure game. When I dropped the difficulty, I was really surprised by how forgiving it is in terms of the damage you take in. I think at the various checkpoints in the boss fight, it refilled my health completely. So if you are having any kind of difficulty, playing it on the easiest difficulty will alleviate that a whole bunch, I think. I also didn't like some of the puzzles. I thought some of the puzzles with the gates could be a little too hidden in the world, where the way you figure them out is maybe a little bit too subtle. But there are only a few of those. There aren't that many that are that bad. And I really like, to counter that, I really, really like the various platforming puzzles that the game throws in every now and again. I kind of wish there were more, because they do some fun and creative things that are both fun in terms of gameplay, but fun set pieces visually. Yeah, it's a really good game. And I think it's a game that, while you would have to be the judge of this, while there are dark elements to it, I think this would be a great game for younger kids. How young, that's going to vary. Every kid, depending on age and maturity, is going to vary wildly. I'm not a parent, but I think if you know your kid and know what they can handle, I would say if your kid can handle something like Coco, for example, because that has some darkness to it. Fucking dude tries to kill the kid for it. If your kid can handle Pixar movies, which like to get dark in places, then I think Kenna would be a very good game for them. The platform stuff, you can adjust the difficulty there, so that could be kind of tricky. But outside of that, I think it's a very good game for them. But that will do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog and my playthrough of Kenna, Bridge of Spirits. So, yeah, as always, I am Mark Kuznez. Remember, that's me. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, including the streams, which I have brought back again, just as a reminder, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Central Time on weekdays. But if you enjoy any of that stuff, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/pxs. Over there, you get an exclusive monthly Q&A, some Discord roles, some Discord goodies. You get a private Discord channel is what I was trying to get to, where you can talk to me and I can talk to you, and then the people who aren't in it don't know what's going on, and we can laugh at them. Laugh at them. No, we won't laugh at them. We don't laugh at them. We laugh at people in that channel because Sunny's there. And it's just, we love Sunny, but Sunny's Sunny. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you know, you know. There's also other random drops and whatnot on the Patreon, depending on your tier, of course. Or you could just support me if that is your fancy. That is, again, patreon.com/pxs. In addition to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. But that is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoy this here episode, and I hope wherever and whenever you're watching this or listening to this, I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. But for now, adios, arrivederci.
It's go time.